April 1st, 1925. 'Twas an April Fool ham. The boys fell for it again, and the gallery on the steps of the Federal Building got their big laughs the same as of yore. Glenn MacLeod's April Fool stunt of chaining an imitation ham to the pavement Wednesday on 3rd Avenue near Union Street lured many to their downfall, and a hoot from the gallery. Ernie Sharp, auto salesman, is shown attempting to cart away the surprise find. He didn't. Gets proposal by radio. Receiving the first radio proposal in the Pacific Northwest had this reaction Wednesday on Peggy of KFOA, who in real life is Miss Marguerite Smith, Seattle girl announcer. He fell in love with her voice is the story of the party of the other part. Girl's voice through air charms young man, wants to wed. Miss Marguerite Smith, a young Seattle pianist and radio announcer, got the first wireless proposal in the Pacific Northwest Wednesday. Miss Schmidt announces as Peggy of KFOA and directs Hopper Kelly programs Wednesday evenings. Her voice, with which a young fellow in the South End fell in love, is heard by thousands of radio fans every week. The young fellow admits in his proposal that it is Miss Schmidt's voice that thrills him. Another admirer, out on the west side, wrote to Miss Schmidt Wednesday too. He said that even a curtain lecture in such a well-modulated voice would be the very poetry of acoustics. Then he added, "Too late, I was married years ago." But getting back to this young chap in the South End, his letter says, "Would it be asking too much for you to notify me whether you are married or single? If the latter, I would be deeply pleased to correspond with you. I am sure I could make you happy if you ever decide to leave the ranks you are in now." After this preliminary word flight, the young man becomes lyrical. He goes on, "I never wished to be married until I heard the voice of my dreams coming through the ether. I cannot wait until your program comes on. I just want to fly to you." The young man, according to his letter, has done some detective work around town, trying to discover Miss Schmidt by her voice, but he has failed, he writes. A Star reporter asked Miss Schmidt what she thought about the radio proposal. "Just say," said the voice from KFOA, "that I am wedded. Yes, go on. To my art." April 2nd, 1925. Waukesha man nabbed in raid staged by wife. Charles Gill, head of the Gill Lumber Company, Waukesha, Wisconsin, is in jail here Thursday, charged with a statutory offence as a result of his wife's detective operations. Mrs. Gill led a police raid Wednesday night on the apartment of Mrs. Armanda Purvis, beauty parlour owner, where her husband and Mrs. Purvis are said to have been found in a compromising position. Both were arrested. Gill started extended trips to Chicago on business some time ago, according to his wife. She became suspicious and followed him here to find that business often took him to cabarets in company with the beauty shop proprietor. Mrs. Gill rented an apartment near the one frequented by her husband, where she took up residence with her 18-year-old daughter. Wednesday night, she saw Gill and Mrs. Purvis enter the building shortly before midnight. The raid followed. April 3rd, 1925. First, neck party. This action picture of an Allosaurus attacking a Trachodon wasn't made on 2nd Avenue by the Star's photographer, but this newspaper promises you just as big a thrill as though it was. For Arthur Conan Doyle, in his masterwork of fiction, The Lost World, makes these prehistoric monsters so realistic that you shiver when you read it, as much as Professor Challenger and his little band of explorers shiver when they find them. The Lost World is the Star's next serial starting Monday. Don't fail to begin it. April 4th, 1925. Dog was cause of it all. Now 2 women air their troubles in City Court. "I don't want no fleas on me," said Mrs. Sadie Morrison. "Well, you gotta quit kicking my dog around," replied pretty Mrs. Virginia Kruger, 23. And with those remarks, according to testimony in City Court today, a hair-pulling melee started in the lobby of the Ambassador, Pratt and Pennsylvania Streets on March 18th. Mrs. Kruger is charged with assault and battery. Mrs. Morrison said she was sitting in the lobby with her small daughter when Mrs. Kruger strolled in with Roddle, her pet canine. Observing the child, Roddle became playful and jumped toward the child, and in doing so tore the fringe on Mrs. Morrison's dress, according to her testimony. Admitting she gave the dog a gentle shove with her foot, Mrs. Morrison said Mrs. Kruger struck her. Then Mrs. Kruger told about the fleas statement by Mrs. Morrison, and besides that, Judge, she made faces at me like a silly child, said Mrs. Kruger. Mrs. Madeline Smead, employed at the office, said she saw both of the women standing out in the middle of the lobby pulling hair. Summing up the evidence, Judge Wilmoth continued the case until April the 11th pending investigation. April 5th, 1925. Former preacher elopes once more. Father of 10 children quits home and sister-in-law also is missing. W. W. Culp, 40-year-old father of 10 children and former pastor of the Methodist Episcopal Church at Spring Valley, who 2 years ago eloped with the 18-year-old choir leader of his church, has eloped again according to information received here by probate judge S.C. Wright. This time, according to Judge Wright's information, the former preacher chose his sister-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy Culp, 22, mother of 2 children, who resided at Napanee, Indiana. Culp and his wife and children have been living at South Bend, Indiana. Culp and his sister-in-law first disappeared simultaneously, and after being absent for a short period returned to their homes and were forgiven, Judge Wright was informed. Later, during February, they disappeared again and have not been heard from since, although Indiana authorities have been seeking them. Culp and his choir leader disappeared from the Spring Valley parsonage late one night. Several weeks later, they were discovered in a Michigan city. Returned to Greene County, Ohio, the girl was turned over to her parents and Culp was charged with desertion and fined $500 and sentenced to a year in the workhouse. He served only a few days because of an error in commitment papers. With his family, he then moved to Napanee, Indiana, and later to South Bend. Since they left Ohio, another child was born. April 6th, 1925. Father and son in same police cell on traffic charges. Father and son arrested for 2 separate traffic offences, one Saturday, one yesterday, by the same policeman, are locked up in the same cell at the 4th Precinct. Robert Cook, the father of L Street Southwest, was the first arrested Saturday afternoon by policeman Milton D. Smith for reckless driving. Rogers Cook was arrested yesterday morning, also by Smith, for having dead tags and no permit. Not until the second man was booked at the precinct was their relationship discovered. April 7th, 1925. Travel by water. 40 hours Seattle to San Francisco. That's speed. Speed and luxury combined. Whether business or pleasure bent, the HF Alexander gets you there in record time, gives you more time at your journey's end. And the short ocean voyage is so zestful and restful you wish it were longer. Service and appointments equal to a metropolitan hotel. Deluxe twin-bed suites, telephones in every room, luxurious lounging and smoking rooms, children's playroom, jazz orchestra, dancing afternoon and evening. These are but a few of the distinctive features. Travel on the supership, the HF Alexander, and see for yourself how good it is. April 8th, 1925. President to buy no new suit for Easter. President Coolidge is carrying his economy ideas rigidly into his Easter program. Recently published stories that the president had practiced economy by buying a $65 Easter suit were all right, it was said at the White House today, except that the president had spent nothing at all for new Easter toggery. The last suit purchased by the president was 3 months ago, and he is not buying another for next Sunday. April 9th, 1925. Photographer says men are the vain sex. Delicate adjustment of tie is big question before camera. Women are the vainer sex according to the teachings of the ages, but before the camera, men hold title to vanity and finicky conduct, Indianapolis photographers say. Business appointments and cares of the day are shelved while the man subject tackles the delicate and lengthy task of adjusting the necktie, a Pennsylvania street studio owner said. It is arrangement of the tie that causes more disputes between photographers and their male patrons than any other matter. Wrinkles in the coat bother men more than the arrangement of women's dress, a favourite masculine comment being, "That coat looks like I'd slept in it." Women's dresses are so flimsy nowadays that the question of a fold more or less is immaterial, the picture takers say. Many women have their pictures taken once a year, but few men are photographed more than once a decade, it was stated. Indianapolis photographers are chuckling over the reply of a harassed member of their profession who faced the fire of a woman customer. "This picture doesn't do me justice," the woman said. "Mercy, not justice, is what you need, madam," was the photographer's rejoinder. April 10th, 1925. English learn to like US waffles. Sale of irons is cleverly tied up with crossword puzzle campaign. America is to blame. The American waffle is threatening the centuries-old popularity of Yorkshire pudding. When the first waffle iron reached England, there was a considerable discussion as to whether it was machinery and thereby dutiable. The waffle iron won, and now the Lions restaurants, which dot England and act as signposts, for there is one on every corner, are popularising the waffle. An energetic young man handling a campaign to popularise the waffle noticed that waffles were made in cross-sections and promptly linked up his waffle campaign with the crossword puzzle craze. Every waffle was promised as a crossword puzzle, the squares being filled with syrup and the keys being printed on the menus. England is learning to eat waffles by the crossword puzzle method, and liking both the puzzles and the waffles. April 11th. 1925. Hens who answer call of mistress bring man's arrest. Hens who knew and answered the call of the voice of their mistress, Mrs. T.H. Virgo of Fresno, led to the arrest of F.B. Skelton, who is being held on charges of burglary in connection with widespread chicken thefts. Accompanied by friends, Mrs. Virgo visited Skelton's place here, where over 300 hens alleged to have been stolen from various chicken owners were kept. Calling to the chickens in her own peculiar way, Mrs. Virgo was rewarded when her own hens rushed to her with clucks of welcome. Officers, satisfied with the identification, arrested Skelton. April 12th, 1925. Gun gets $20 for female gold diggers. Gold digging with 6 shooters netted a $20 gold piece and some small change for 2 bob-haired burglarettes who entered the home of H.G. Epps, contractor, just outside the city limits at 2:30 this morning. They woke Mr. Epps, an elderly man who was alone in the house, by poking him in the ribs with their pistols and demanding his money. When he gave them the gold piece, which was in his trousers pocket, they cursed him in unmistakably feminine voices, he says, and made a further search which resulted in finding some small change. 23-year-old youth secretly weds widow, 63. A May and December wedding, with the usual order of the sexes reversed, was disclosed here today in the marriage of Theodore Forrest, 23, a government clerk, and Mrs. Flora Ritter Gortner, 63, member of a well-known and wealthy capital family. They were secretly married Thursday at Williamsport, Pennsylvania. "I'm sure I'll be happier with her than with one of those, well, flappers," said the young groom. The bride had nothing to say. She is a sister of William M. Ritter, millionaire manufacturer, who last Christmas attained wide publicity by giving $2.5 million in stock in his lumber companies to 124 of his employees. April 13th, 1925. Rich hobo lays out big feed for tramps. There was good food and plenty of it for all the tramps in San Diego on Easter Sunday, and no work connected with it either. James Eads Howe, millionaire friend of the itching feet gentry, played host to all the beaux who could ride the rods or amble into town in similarly inexpensive fashion. For several weeks the word has spread in the strange grapevine of the open road. No need to beg a lump on Easter Day went up and down the coast. When Howe threw open his doors Sunday, they were draped on the lawn and along the roadside, and fresh recruits piloted their thick-soled shoes toward the house throughout the morning. Speeches by Howe and Ralph Schneider, New York sociologist, followed the feast. "So there," say women as they go to church minus Easter bonnets. Women of the Christian church here attended Easter services yesterday hatless. They left their new Easter bonnets at home to disprove assertions of men in the church that the principal reason they went to church was to display their new hats. April 14th, 1925. Society woman denies report of bare feet. Mrs. Frederick Y. Dowsey today denied a recent report from White Sulphur Spring, West Virginia, that she had taken daily jaunts over the golf course in her bare feet. She said the report was an absolute, complete and total error, and that she had never appeared outside of her apartment in her bare feet, except on the bathing beach. April 15th, 1925. Gives leg for drink. Detectives retrieve wooden member from pawn shop. I'd give my right leg for a drink of good liquor, said Thomas Ryan, whereupon he did that very thing. Arraigned in court, Thomas reluctantly admitted he had pawned his wooden limb to raise money to satisfy his thirst. Detectives were sent to the sign of the 3 bells and retrieved the missing leg. You'll need it during the next 30 days in the workhouse, said the judge. April 16th, 1925. Transmit X-ray picture by wire. Photograph of hand showing bone structure is sent by telegraph. An X-ray negative of a person's hand was sent here today by wire from New York. The demonstration, made by the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, shows that the day is at hand when an X-ray diagnosis of an injury or ailment by specialists at great distance from the patient can be made. The picture of a left hand, showing in detail the bone structure and a ring on the 3rd finger, was sent from the New York Telephone Company's offices and received at the offices of the Victor X-Ray Corporation here just 7 minutes later. According to specialists, the negative was as clear and distinct as the average plate and could readily be used for diagnostic purposes. April 17th, 1925. We don't want to fight, honest, but we do like to visit. War veterans of the CEF eyed Seattle visitors to Victoria, British Columbia with suspicion Friday. Also, they glowered on slim US Coast Guard rum chasers chasing about in Puget Sound. The rum chasers, according to resolutions adopted by Vancouver Island veterans, are merely the first skirmish line of a huge American Navy disguised as harmless, comparatively, boozebusters. Enforcement of the dry law, according to the resolution, is merely incidental to the vast appropriations of the United States government for revenue cutters. Behind the rum chasers, the veterans say, the US is going to build up a huge fleet supposedly to conquer Canada. Resentment in British Columbia against seizure of Canadian rum carriers is at the bottom of the veterans' protests. The ex-soldiers will take the matter up with their representatives at Ottawa and perhaps with the League of Nations. April 18th, 1925. Naughty Harvard humour is barred by pious Boston. The police of Cambridge and Boston today ordered the removal of the Harvard Lampoon monthly humorous college publication from newsstands throughout the city, because of alleged improper pictures appearing in the current issue. Bookstores and newsstands were visited and copies seized. Dealers were notified that if more copies were displayed or sold, prosecution would follow. The issue is a burlesque of a weekly news magazine. Objection was raised to 2 different pictures, the cover design, a burlesque picture of Washington crossing the Delaware, and the picture of a woman on an inside page. The use of an American flag on the cover was regarded as illegal. The picture within, said to be a burlesque of a well-known painting, was said by the police to be in violation of the law relating to indecent pictures. The police tonight said that the editors of the magazine had readily agreed to withdraw the issue from circulation when their attention was called to the alleged illegal illustrations. April 19th, 1925. Boy, 21, gets $5,000 for being man. Never took drink, never smoked. Francis McQuiddy of Canadian Texas, 100 miles northeast of Amarillo, received a check for $5,000 on his 21st birthday yesterday from his grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. J.F. Johnson, and written thereon was, "For being a man while still a boy." Young McQuiddy had never taken a drink of intoxicating liquor, nor smoked a cigarette or used tobacco in any form. He is engaged in the cattle business. April 20th, 1925. Destroy candy having taste of intoxicants. Silver foiled chocolate candy valued at $15,000, each piece containing a taste of whiskey or brandy, was destroyed today by representatives of the United States Marshal's Office. Thousands of brightly coloured boxes were piled in the East Side Street in front of the warehouse where they had been stored. While police held crowds back, the confections were dumped into barrels and broken into pieces with baseball bats, the liquid pouring into nearby sewers. April 21st, 1925. Robber returns loot taken from bondsman's home. Charles D. Hood, 16th Street Northwest, is a professional bondsman and frequently keeps thieves and other law violators from spending time in jail by furnishing bail for them. He is today a firm believer in the old adage that the thief will not rob his friend knowingly. About 10 days ago, some thief visited the home of Mr. Hood and took away some jewellery, old coins and a small sum of money. The bondsman notified the police of his loss and the papers reported the visit of the marauder. This morning's mail brought a COD package to the Hood residence, and on opening the package, the jewellery, coins and other loot were found intact. It is supposed that when the thief found out to whom the goods belonged, he decided to uphold the ethics of the profession. April 22nd, 1925. Special gun court planned for Chicago. The great number of criminal cases in Chicago courts involving the use of a gun has resulted in a plan for a special gun court similar to the traffic courts in which gun cases segregated from the others on the docket are to be heard. The system will become effective May 1st. The recent slaying of policemen, 7 of whom have been killed in the last 4 days, is believed to have prompted the idea. April 23rd, 1925. Aghast, naming freight trains now. Little groups of serious thinkers gathered aghast in Seattle Railroad offices today. The best aghasters of the Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, and the Union Pacific did grand lofty aghasting. They were surpassed, however, by the Milwaukee's aghaster, who had previous experience when his road went into bankruptcy recently. All of this was when the Pennsylvania, one of those snobbish eastern roads, announced that it was going to name all its freight trains. Some of the names picked are the Bison, the Blue Goose, the Comet, the Uncle Sam, and the Eclipse. "We can't let 'em get away with this," said the Great Northern Freight Chief. "Who's got a name for the Seattle-Tacoma freight?" "The Slumber Party," suggested the Milwaukee man. So they put that down on a pad and started serious thinking again. The Slumber Party is going to have mufflers on the engine, a bulletin from the Great Northern office said at noon, in deference to the City of Destiny's habits. The Hayrack was suggested for a name for a Milwaukee freight between Mukilteo and Suquamish carrying dairy supplies. There was an objection to this, however. It seems the Milwaukee doesn't make that route. Too bad. 2 of the freights running north during the night are going to be called the Heavenly Twins because of the unearthly noise they make. Name of railroad on request. One of the westbounds over the Cascades is to be christened the Thermometer Paradox because it climbs into winter and drops into summer. This suggestion wins the Chamber of Commerce Gold Medal with palms for the best climate boost of the year. Out of the conference too, there came a suggestion for naming a Union Pacific passenger train that leaves Seattle late at night and wanders down into Grays Harbor. This is going to be called the 2 Centuries. It leaves in one and arrives in another. April 24th, 1925. Lampoon is barred. Harvard publication found unfit for males according to Postal Department ruling. The April 18 issue of the Lampoon, a publication conducted by Harvard students, was held today by the Post Office Department to be unmailable. Its circulation already had been held up by the Boston Police and the postmaster there because they regarded some of its features as unfit for publication and in violation of the postal laws. The issue contained, among other things, a cartoon of the Goddess of Liberty minus most of her clothes. Acting Solicitor Donnelly of the Post Office Department, after looking over the magazine, notified the Boston postmaster he had been correct in holding the matter unmailable. April 25th, 1925. Rum runners frighten lovers on beach and give them 2 quarts. Lovers parked by a moonlit beach. A grating sound as a boat was landed. A surprised gasp from the occupants of the boat, and a burly rum runner. Mrs. Grundy's latest accomplice in Anacortes whipped out a revolver and poked it under the nose of the enamoured swain. "Sit tight and don't chirp, and you're all right," said he. "We've got a cargo to land here, and we don't want any monkey business." The girl shrank closer to her escort, whose manly bosom heaved with indignation at this unceremonious interruption of his fussing party. So overcome was he that his reply was a mumbled, "All right, Beau. Guess you've got me this time." Then 2 big trucks rolled silently down to the beach, and swift-footed men loaded them with case after case of superfine scotch direct from Canada. 6 trips were made in the dory to the boat lying offshore before the wet goods was safely landed. Then the trucks with the costly cargo rolled away into the night. "'S all right, buddy. Have these on us," said the bootlegger, thrusting 2 bottles of the hooch into the laps of the speechless couple. "Now run along, and don't let us spoil your little party. We've got a date with some guys a long way from here before morning." He jumped into the dory, and shortly a muffled putt-putt was heard as the rum runners pulled away. April 26th, 1925. Dog after cat scares elephant and causes excitement in circus. Spectators at a circus in the Colosseum last night were thrown into a state of excitement when a large elephant stampeded and charged towards the stands just as the evening performance was commencing. Several persons were knocked down and trampled in the rush to escape. The animal, which was carrying a cage of polar bears, was frightened by a stray dog chasing a cat across the arena. Trainers succeeded in quieting it before it reached the stands. Feminine rum runner caught. Smartly dressed woman taken with loaded car near Beaumont. A feminine rum runner, attractive of appearance and accompanied by a bull terrier and a pearl-handled revolver, was brought into this city by prohibition agents today following the seizure of her coupe and 195 quarts of liquor at Burrows Ferry, Newton Parish today. She gave the name of Mrs. Edna Clayton, 28, and said she was bound for Dallas from New Orleans. Her husband, she says, is a Dallas tailor. Her arrest by federal officers followed a series of mishaps experienced, she said, between New Orleans and the Texas line. Getting off to a bad start by wrecking her car shortly after loading, she encountered en route the typical touring luck of a woman, she says. Friday night she slept in the car in the woods, fearing to stop at a hotel. When first approached by the officers, she denied that her car contained whiskey, stating she was on her way to Dallas to visit relatives. Later, however, when the officers threatened to break into her coupe, she confessed to the cargo and pleaded for clemency, stating it was every cent she had in the world. The woman, when arrested, was dressed in a smart tailored suit, with tan hose and shoes to match. The revolver, she told officers, was for hijackers. April 27th, 1925. Check your dog, madam? Poor Fifi doesn't have to stay home now in loneliness while his doting mistress goes to the matinee. For one, New York theatre has provided a check room where your pet dog or cat may be checked while you are enjoying the show. Women of Germany not cured of war. Writer sees feminine hand in election of Paul von Hindenburg to presidency. The German people, including the women of Germany, have voted for another war. The election of von Hindenburg to the presidency of the land of warlord is notice to the world that the men and women across the Rhine want to try again for world domination. The most disquieting feature of von Hindenburg's return to power is the proof that the women of Germany are not for future peace. Von Hindenburg's plurality came from the women. Had they repudiated the warlord at yesterday's election, militarism would have received a crushing blow. The Fraus of the fatherland, however, have shown that they are still thrilled by the goose step, and that military hero worship continues to be the ideal of German womanhood. Yesterday's election thus demonstrates that the World War defeat has brought no change into the heart of Germany. Germany is twice as powerful as France in manpower, and the German women want their men to show it. When the women of a nation vote to place the nation's destinies in the hands of the war makers, the men cannot lag behind. Feminism across the Rhine has voted this warning to the world. At present, Germany cannot wage war, but within a generation, the situation will be very different. France is bankrupting itself to hold the Germans down, and this condition cannot go on forever. There are only two answers to make for von Hindenburg's election. Either Germany must be brought off from another war by revision of the Versailles Treaty, or France must be guaranteed safety by the Allies. Neither answer seems likely for the moment. And so, President Coolidge's hope to preserve peace by summoning another arms limitation conference sinks to a shadowy unreality before the ruthless fact of the vote of confidence given von Hindenburg by the German plebiscite. April 28th, 1925. Would do it again, girl says, confessing slaying. I am not the least bit sorry for what I have done. I would do it again. He was cruel to me and deserved all he got. With these words, Miss Mildred H., babe, sage, proprietress of a roadhouse at Little Falls, New Jersey, explained to police today why she shot and killed Samuel Cantalmo, married man and her partner in business. Miss Sage gave herself up to police early today with this announcement. I have just murdered a man. When police went to the roadhouse, they found Cantalmo on the floor with 4 bullets in his body. Turns editor while husband is confined. While her husband, George Lynn, editor of the Evening Herald, was in jail on criminal libel charges Monday, Mrs. Georgette Lynn got out his paper on schedule and continued the editorials which caused his arrest. The editor was jailed Saturday on complaint of E.F. Sanguinetti, millionaire rancher, who claims that Lynn falsely accused him of selling polluted milk to babies and failure to make proper tax returns. Despite the eagerness of friends to bail him out, Lynn sticks to his determination to rot in jail rather than surrender constitutional rights of free speech. April 29th, 1925. Near riot halts trial. Friends of Arizona editor ignore court warning. A near riot was precipitated Tuesday at the trial of George W. Lynn, local editor, accused of criminal libel, when scores of sympathisers disregarded repeated warnings to keep silent and broke into loud cheers for Lynn. The pandemonium lasted several minutes and ended with a fierce outburst of coyote yells. When order was restored, Justice Smith cited one spectator for contempt and continued the trial to Wednesday. Lynn, formerly of Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, was arrested Saturday on complaint of E.F. Sanguinetti, millionaire rancher, who charges that Lynn criminally libelled him in a series of editorials written by Lynn for the Yuma Evening Herald, and that the editorial falsely accused him of selling polluted milk. April 30th, 1925. Dog kidnaps bear's cub for 8 hours. Maternal instinct in wonder. A big Alaskan dog at the City Park Zoo caused zoo officials no end of trouble when the Malamute entered the den of Kid, a bear, and kidnapped one of Kid's cubs. After 8 hours, keepers succeeded in luring Wonder away from her adopted puppy long enough to return it to Kid. Since then, Wonder has been in solitary confinement in order to prevent repetition of the escapade. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and please also consider watching another one of my videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.